What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Johnny K Picks. And in this video, since there's no UFC for a few more weeks, I decided to do something a little bit fun and interesting. I'm going to go over my top 5 women and top 10 men UFC fighters that I think will make a splash in 2022. As always, don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button for me. And also don't forget to turn on those notifications if you haven't already. Follow me on Twitter at Johnny K Picks. And yeah, I think that about covers everything. Let's get to the good stuff. Okay, so the criteria that I use to make my list are as follows. I made it to where none of the UFC fighters are currently ranked lower than 10. They can only have 4 UFC fights or less. And lastly, age and overall record does not apply. And the reasoning why I didn't use age or overall record in my criteria was because sometimes UFC fighters don't get to the UFC until they're over 30 years old. So I didn't want to fault them for that. It's not their fault. Some people take a little longer than others. So when it's your time, it's your time. And the criteria that I used on how I ranked these fighters are as follows. Talent and skills, potential, and the quality of their UFC wins. Meaning like who they fought, if they got a finish or not, unanimous decision, split decision, stuff like that. Simple enough, right? Okay, let's get going. Okay, so to start things off here, let's start with the ladies. And I'm going to break down the top 5 women that I think will make a splash in 2022. Honorable mention, Maria Agapova, 2-1 in the UFC. 2-2 if you count Dana White Contender Series. And she has 2 finishes. I really wanted to add her in my top 5 list, but I just couldn't pull the trigger, and I wanted to give her an honorable mention anyways. And the main reason why I couldn't was because of the Shannon Dobson loss. She was a massive betting favorite, and she blew her gas tank in the first round trying to finish her, and it ended up backfiring on her, and she got finished in the second round. So that still kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth with her. But I will give her kudos in her last fight against Mezzo. She looked really good, technical striking, she had a good cardio, and she did end up finishing Mezzo too. I do think she's going to improve, and she's definitely one to watch. Number 5, Cheyenne Vlismas, 2-1 in the UFC, 3-1 if you count Dana White Contender Series, and 1 finish. Cheyenne's best asset is her striking. She's very technical, she throws a lot of volume, she likes to stay at range, she does like to push forward, but she can strike on her back foot as well. She has good cardio, and her striking defense is really good too. Where she does get in trouble though is if opponents try to take her down. In her last fight though, she did show that she has worked on her takedown defense, but that to me, that's something she still needs to continue to work on, and maybe a little bit of her ground game as well. But I do think her striking is there, so if she can continue to work on those couple things, I think she can move up the rankings in that division. Number 4, Casey O'Neill. 3-0 in the UFC with 3 finishes. So I really like O'Neill's fighting style. She has really good forward pressure, and she's not afraid to mix it up with her opponent. And obviously she's really good at taking down her opponent, and she has a very good ground game. She has really good ground and pound, and she can submit her opponent when she gets on the mat. So those are her 2 best assets in my eyes. The couple things that she can work on though is her striking isn't quite there yet. It's just not very technical, and she does get hit a lot, so she's going to need to work on her striking defense, because sooner or later she's going to come across a fighter that can probably knock her out, so she needs to be a little bit more defensive with that. But she's only 24 years old, so I do see a lot of room for improvement, and she's really young still, so she definitely has time. Number 3, Cara Rosa, 4-0 in the UFC with 4 decisions. So Rosa is very well-rounded. She's really good at striking, and she can take her opponent down and go on the mat if she wants to as well. And she also has really good takedown defense. If there was one thing I would say that she could work on is her striking defense. She does tend to get hit a lot, but she does have good volume, and her striking's pretty good, so she gets away with it at the moment now. If she's going to move up the bantamweight division, she's going to need to work on her striking defense a bit. Other than that, I do think she's going to move up the rankings if she can get a couple more wins under her belt. The bantamweight division for women isn't the greatest right now. She could probably be in the top 5 in another win or 2. Number 2, Erin Blanchfield, 2-0 in the UFC with 2 decisions. If Blanchfield didn't dominate Miranda Maverick the way she did in her last fight, I probably wouldn't even have her at this high on the list, and maybe not even on my list at all. But after the Maverick fight though, she definitely opened my eyes, and she's going to be a big problem in this division. Her ground game is legit. She can take down her opponents at will with trips or single legs, double legs, you name it. Her striking isn't that good, but it's not terrible either. So there's definitely room for improvement, and she will need to work on her striking. But other than that, for being 22, she looks really good. And I can definitely see her improving fast, and she can be a contender in the flyweight division real soon. Number 1, Manon Fiorot, 3-0 in the UFC with 2 finishes. Okay, so this is my number 1 woman, and her nickname is the Beast for a reason. Out of all the women I went over on this list, I think Fiorot has the best striking and the most technical. Her boxing is very technical. She uses her kicks very well. She has very good takedown defense, and if she wants, she can take her opponent to the mat for ground and pound. I haven't seen her being taken down yet, but I am curious to see how she will match up against a grappler. So for me, if I had one thing for her to work on, I think it would be her BJJ. Maybe just work from her back just in case if she does get taken down. Even if it's just to be defensive, she doesn't need to like go for submissions or anything, but she's gonna need to know sooner or later how to defend if she gets taken down. And also, if she can work on her BJJ and add that dimension to her game, she's going to be a force to be reckoned with. I can definitely see her moving up in the division really quickly. And honestly, maybe in 2 or maybe 3 more fights, I can definitely see her taking on Valentina for the belt. Yeah, that's a different story. We won't go there. But I definitely see her being a contender sooner rather than later. Alright, so those are my top 5 UFC women that I think will make a splash. So let's get to my top 10 men that I think will make a splash in 2022. Honorable mention, Manel Kape, 2-2 in the UFC with 2 finishes. So I couldn't put him in my top 10, mainly because of his record only being 2-2 in the UFC so far. I definitely think he has the potential to move up in the rankings, but I will give him a little bit of credit. In his UFC debut loss, he was kind of thrown to the wolves a bit against Pantoja, and he was super hyped up, so a lot of people were hoping that he would look a lot better than he did, but he kind of just looked a little... I don't know if he was nervous or not, but he definitely lost that fight. And in his second fight where he lost against Nicola, that was a very close split decision. It could have went either way. I know a lot of people thought that he did win that. Other than that, his last 2 wins where he finished his opponents, he looked very good. His striking was on display, and he's definitely one to look out for in the future. Number 10, Nazarene Imavov, 3-1 in the UFC with 2 finishes. So I'm pretty sure that no one's going to have this guy on their top 10 list, but honestly, I like this guy a lot. He is very well-rounded. He's good on the mat. He has good striking. He has the power, and he can submit his opponents. Luckily for him, he is in the middleweight division, so he can move up the rankings a little bit faster than others on the list. And like I said, I really think he's solid at everything. So if I had something for him to improve, I would just work on everything. Like, just hone in your skills a little bit more. Work on your takedowns. Work on your BJJ. Your striking can always be more technical than it is. So if he can just work on his overall game, I think he's going to be in the top 5 sooner rather than later. Number 9, David Dvorak, 3-0 in the UFC with 1 finish. So I do think Dvorak is flying under the radar just a bit. And I'm not sure if that's because he's not as active as some of these fighters, but this guy has the potential to move up in the flyweight division real quick. His striking is his best asset, and he does have a pretty good submission game. There is room for improvement for both. If I had one thing for him to work on, I think I would work on his wrestling a bit more. He doesn't really go for takedowns too much. If he does start doing that, he can use his submission game when he gets his opponent to the ground. I like his striking. I think his striking defense is good. So if he just works on a little bit of his ground game, I think he'll move up the rankings. And honestly, a good matchup for him right now would be against Manel Kape. So to me, that would be a really good matchup to make right now. Number 8, Jack Shore, 4-0 in the UFC with 2 finishes. So with Jack Shore, I really like his game. And for me, his best asset is his ground and submission game. I do think he has the talent to start fighting higher ranked guys than him. Other than the split decision against Azur, he's steamrolled all of his opponents so far. So I think it's time for him to get some ranked guys, or pretty close to being ranked at least. The only bad thing for him though is he's in the bantamweight division, and that division right now is exciting and it's stacked. There's a lot of fighters, so he's gonna have to move up kind of slow. I think. I don't think he's gonna be able to rush up the rankings that fast. But if he can work on his striking just a little bit more, just to get more technical, I do think he'll be a problem in that division. Number 7, Tom Aspinall, 4-0 in the UFC with 4 finishes. I think the heavyweight division right now is a little tricky to judge because honestly, there's like 3 or 4 fighters at the top that could be contenders right now, and that's about it. Everyone else is kind of lumped together. I'm not saying they have the same talent, but they're just kind of in the middle. I mean, there's really no contenders other than like 3 or 4 guys at the very most. But honestly, I do think eventually Aspinall can be a contender. And he could have been ranked a little bit higher on my list, but I looked at the guys that he beat, and the best person he beat was Spivak, which was a pretty good win. I'll give him that one. But the other 3 wins were against trash cans. He does have great power, he's very fast, and his striking is really good for a heavyweight. And apparently he has a really good ground game, so he says in some of his interviews, but we haven't been able to see it yet. But hey, I'll trust him if that's what he says. Either way, I like his game. I think he's going to move up the rankings pretty fast in the heavyweight division. And if he can fight someone in the maybe close to like 7, 6, 5 range, I think he'll move up the rankings real quick too. Number 6, Andre Muniz, 4-0 in the UFC. 6-0 if you include the Dana White contender wins with 3 finishes. Muniz wasn't even on my radar one bit until his last couple fights. And man, those were some good wins. He subbed Anders with ease. He actually subbed Jacare, and he subbed Fabinski. So this guy is just an animal on the ground. I don't even know why anybody would even remotely want to get on close to him to get taken down, because they're going to get submitted within minutes after that. So I haven't seen too much of his striking. I'm not saying it's really bad, but if he could work on something, that's probably the only thing he really needs to work on, because his ground game is legit. It's already top notch. And if he can work on that striking in that middleweight division, then I think he's going to be a problem. A lot of fighters in the middleweight division don't go on the ground, they don't wrestle, so that's a huge advantage for him. So the arrow for him is pointed up only. I don't see him slowing down either, maybe until he gets in the top 5 guys. Yeah, he's going to be a problem in this division. Number 5, Shavkat Rakhmonov, 2-0 in the UFC with 2 finishes. This guy is one of my favorite guys to watch, and I know he's only fought twice in the UFC, which is why he's number 5, because I couldn't move him up anymore, and I really wanted to. But if he had maybe 1 or 2 more, he might have been in the top 3 for me. But still, this guy is going to be a problem in the welterweight division. His striking is super technical, his submission game is on point, and I do think he has good takedown defense, and he's really long for the welterweight division too. So he's going to, like I said, he's going to be a problem for a lot of people. If I had something for him to work on, it would just be continue to work on your overall game. I think he does a lot of good things, maybe not great yet, but if he just keeps improving with his striking and his ground game, submission game, BJJ, all that good stuff, he's going to be a contender very soon. Maybe a couple more wins, he's going to be ranked, and then after that, the sky's the limit for him. Number 4, Mateusz Gamrot, 3-1 in the UFC with 3 finishes. So I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. This guy is going to be a contender in the lightweight division. There, I said it. He just needs a couple more fights with top 10 guys, and he's going to be in line for a title shot in no time. I think Gamrot's super well-rounded. He has really good striking. His wrestling game is good. He can submit you, and he just does everything good. There's really nothing that I can't see that's too alarming. He could work on his cardio just a little bit. I know he looks good in the first and second round, but third round, he could get a little bit better with that. Also, if he could just work on his takedown game, in his last fight against Fajeda, he started trying to take him down too much, and they weren't that great. If he can work on his takedowns maybe a bit, that'll help him out. Especially if he starts fighting the top 5, top 10, top 5 guys in that division. He's gonna need to wrestle if he wants to fight for the belt right now against Charlie Olives. I do see him being a contender very soon though. Number 3, Adrian Yanez, 4-0 in the UFC, 5-0 if you count the Dana White Contender Series with 3 finishes. This is a guy that's just one of my favorite fighters, and I wish I could move him up just a little bit more on the list, but I just can't right now. The main reason why is because he's a bantamweight, and the bantamweight division is so good right now, but I love this guy. So his boxing is top notch in the division. It might even be top 5 in the whole UFC. I haven't yet seen him on the ground, whether he takes down somebody or he gets taken down, but that's definitely something I'm gonna say he can work on. I'm not for sure how good he is on the ground. There's always room for improvement, especially in the bantamweight division. So another thing he can work on too is his striking defense. I know he likes to mix it up with his opponents and go and get into a firefight with them sometimes, but sooner or later though, he's gonna have an opponent where it might backfire on him. If he can shore that up just a little bit, because he can counterpunch anybody, and he might even be one of the best counterpunchers in the game right now too. For me, if he can just work on those things, it's gonna be a slow grind to move up those bantamweight rankings, but in 2 or 3 more wins though, I could definitely see him being in the top 10. Number 2, Ilia Topuria, 3-0 in the UFC with 2 finishes. So I really like Topuria, and he's just another guy that I'm really high on, and I do think he can potentially be the next featherweight champion. He's a super well-rounded fighter. His striking is really good. He does have the power in his hands. He's a good wrestler, and also he can submit people as well. So with the fighters that he has beaten so far, he has shown that he can beat good grapplers, but I would like to see him fight a really good striker. I just want to see exactly where he's at with his striking. But other than that, I think his game is pretty good. He may just want to work on his striking, maybe technical just a little bit, just to be a little bit sharper. He's definitely one to watch in 2022. All right, so before I get into my number 1 pick, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button for me. Number 1, Kazmat Chimaev, 4-0 in the UFC with 4 finishes. How can he not be number 1 to make the biggest splash in 2022? This dude is just an absolute monster. And everybody knows that he's gonna be a champion one day, whether it's in the welterweight division or middleweight. I mean, it may not be in 2022 for whatever reason, but 2023, that might be the year for him. But a lot of fighters just don't want to fight this guy because he's good everywhere. Like, there's really no weaknesses to his game other than potentially his cardio. Because in every one of his fights that we've seen so far, he's only made it into the second round once, and that was like within 60 seconds. So we haven't seen him in round 3. We haven't seen him go over the 1.5 rounds mark. So we don't even know if he can go all 5 rounds for a title yet. But other than his cardio, I like I said, I think he has really good striking, really good wrestling. He has a submission game, is on point. It's just a matter of time before he gets a title shot. And it could be within 1 or 2 more fights, and he might have to fight Usman. And honestly, I'll say it now. If Usman and Chimaev fought today, I do think Usman would win. But if they do fight in a year or so, I may give Chimaev the advantage because he's going to have a little bit more experience. He could potentially work on his cardio, and it's going to give Usman some problems, but that's going to be a really good fight if that happens in a year. Alright guys, so those are my top 10 UFC men that I think will make a splash in 2022. Did I miss anyone? Did I overlook anybody? Feel free to comment below on some of your favorite fighters to watch for. And you don't have to use the same criteria I did. I just used that just to make it a little bit more challenging. As always, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button on your way out. Also, if you're on Twitter, go ahead and follow me at Johnny K Picks. Thank you everybody for watching, and until next time, happy fight night.